Right. Oh,
Thank
awesome.
you.
Oh, that was very nice.
Feels special.
Let's see if that's what I hope.
If it doesn't, I'm in no help, I can tell you that.
Well, I would
Well,
check
that's
the plug.
okay. Good work. There it goes. Okay.
You have a blackjack dealer, right? Pretty good one, too.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to get a job at the casino on the side, and then I can retire with my toes in the sand near a casino. That's my plan.
That's a good plan.
Nice.
This is a good plan.
Nice.
Sounds good to me.
Well, I'm happy that we have this many people because you may look around and say it's a very small crowd, but I as I mentioned to some of the folks earlier, I was in Edmonton and had a crowded room, a lot bigger than this. It was crowded, and I was in Calgary and had 2 people, and I was in Winnipeg and had nobody, not even the organizer. So. Yes, we'd love to have you here, and none of us are going to show up, even the people that invite you. So it happens like that. This is a book I've written. This is it here. And how this book came to be, I had done some research when I was in Huron Perth. When I worked in Huron Perth, done some research on that came out of some work around early childhood testing. And the interesting thing was that what fell out of that research, and I'll talk a bit about it, I collected the data, and then I moved to another school board, and so I put everything in a cardboard box, took it with me. And then I moved to work in Toronto, and I took the cardboard boxes of material with me. And then I went to the UK and packed the boxes at home in Canada, and then when I came back, I had other projects to pursue. And then I was told I had cancer, and that I wouldn't make, I had about a 10% chance of making 5 years. And so I don't tell everybody this stuff. And so I thought I better write this up before I die, because the fact of the matter is, if I don't write it up, it's gone. It dies with me. So I wrote it up, and I kept writing, and I kept researching, and I produced this. And this talks about the research that we did around how, and it just, as I say, it just fell out of some other research we were doing, but the information came out that we hadn't expected, and so I ended up writing that up. And so anyway, I went to see the doctor, and the doctor said, you got about a 10% chance. And then the next time I saw the doctor, he said, I thought you'd been relapsed by now. And then he sent me to another specialist, and he said, we don't know why you're doing as well as you are, but you are. And so I decided that I was going to use whatever time I had left to work on this, because it's going to be my legacy, whatever it's worth. Incidentally, I have reached 8.5 years. So,
Awesome.
yeah, I've reached 8.5 years. And so I'll just keep going. And at the moment, I seem to be okay, so I'm not worried about it. But I don't normally tell people this, but I want you to know, because this is not, I don't do any of this for the money involved. I spend about $10,000 a year on this project. So, and that's my own money. I spend about $10,000 a year on it, because it matters. It matters to me, it matters to you, it matters to parents, it matters to teachers, it matters to our whole society. So this is what I'm here to talk about, and turn this on. And the project is about how do we help our sons to achieve at school. I'm not telling you that you don't know when I tell you boys are not doing well. So this is my background. I have years of research, years of study and writing on this issue of why children underachieve in school. I've been doing this for a long time. And I have listened. This hit me the other day when I was reading something. As of the end of June, I have 50 years in education. I'm still working in education. Teresa can verify that. 'Cause I work at one of her schools. So the reality is I'm still working in education. For 50 years now, the mantra has been educational improvement. I have listened to that for 50 years. And I'm watching 20% of the kids, or very close to that, going down the tubes. After 50 years of dedication to education improvement. And I'm thinking, how could we work on this for 50 years? And we still got a whole crowd of kids that are falling by the wayside. They might not be in this school, they might not be in some other school, but if you look across the country, you're looking at, in the neighborhood, 20% of kids. So I'm on the Odyssey for equality. I travel all over, and it's a multicultural journey. What I want to do is raise people's awareness. We look at the causes, the consequences, and what can be done about kids underachieving in school. Most of the focus is on boys because that's who the issue is about. If I had been doing this in the 80s, I would have been talking about girls underachieving. We did a lot of things around girls' education in the 80s, a lot of them. Now we need to do those things around boys. And I get horrendous resistance. And I might add, well, I'll come to that. So that's the Odyssey for equality, and it's little boy, little girl, and it's success for all children. This isn't about advantaging one group over someone else. I've done about 70 presentations across Canada, in the U.S. and in Europe. I've done presentations to families, educators. You can see the list, child psychiatrists, you name it. I've done radio and television, and magazines. I have publications, all kinds of learning material that I've produced over the years. Books, DVDs, I mean, you name it. And these are in university, they're in colleges, they're being used, people are using them in PhD theses. I mean, it's very significant. And so the question is, who's underachieving? If we're going to talk about underachieving, who are they? Well, a lot of boys are underachieving. And by underachieving, I'm not talking about kids that have biological issues or whatever that prevent them from learning. I'm talking about people that simply aren't achieving to the maximum of their potential. So a child may be doing not too badly, but the fact that if he can do better, he's underachieving. So what are the effects? Well, here are some of the effects, and I hope that's not going to change itself there. But one of them, of course, is lack of interest in school. And I put the term up there, behavioral issues, because you see, and I'm going to tell you a story at this, and I don't mean to belabor these things, but I'll tell you a story about behavioral issues. When we were doing research in Hastings, Prince Edward, I was going over to a school to talk to the school principal, and who had been collecting data on a project we had. And I was walking across the schoolyard, and I said good morning and walked past a woman who was on yard supervision, and I was walking toward a man who was on yard supervision, and two boys ran past. And then I heard the woman teacher yelling at them. This is behind me, so I didn't see anything. Fell looking at me, Dave. I turned around, and they were now standing up against the fence, facing the fence. So I said to the male teacher who was standing right next to me, I said, "What did they do?" And he said, "I don't know. It all looked pretty normal to me." And you see, so when we talk about behavioral issues, it's in the eye of the beholder. So I might look at a child's behavior and say, this is unacceptable. Or someone else might look at that child's behavior and say, yeah, well, looks pretty normal to me. So it's in the eye of a lot of it's in the eye of the beholder. So anyway, then I worked, you have to hear this to believe it, I worked in the UK, and I was the head of special ed in an infant school. Infant schools run up to grade 1. So it was all over the place. And I was the only male in the school, which is understandable. And so they said, well, it wasn't part of my job description, but would I do yard supervision? Sure, I'll have to do yard supervision. And then I was instructed on how we did yard supervision. Children who go out in the yard at recess are not allowed to run. They're to be punished if they run. These are children ranging between 4 and 6. And if they run, they're punished. Oh dear. Well, I'm also a musician, and I have a tendency to, and Teresa can support me on this one, I have a tendency to get the kids totally wired, which means I try to do these things before lunch, before recess, so that the kids don't have to go to math class or wherever either, and drive. It's the grandparent syndrome, you know, and wire the kids and then go home, and the parents are stuck with them. Well, I have to be cautious of that. So, but the point is, that's part of being a child. At least it is for me. It's what we do as children. In that school in the UK, if I went in class and we did some music, the teachers were down on me like you wouldn't believe, because now the children were all hyper. And by God, that was what was important. So I was coming from, I am coming from, and I was coming from a very different mindset. So we get boys suspended, like at least 80% of the kids were suspended from school are boys. Now, is that how school's supposed to work? I mean, this group gets suspended for behaving what's normal for them, and this group doesn't? Is that how school's supposed to work? Or or do the parents of a community come together and build a schoolhouse and hire a teacher to teach their children? Now, I'm not down on teachers with this. I spent a whole lot of years as a teacher. I'm not down on teachers about this. I'm down on a way of thinking where we seem to have lost track of the fact the kids come the way they come. And if your kids all came exactly the way you wanted them to, I'm happy for you. Mine didn't. Mine didn't all come the way I wanted them to come. And a lot of people I know had kids who came, and they didn't come the way the parents wanted them to come. They came the way they came, and you got them. And you can't reject them. And you can't say, well, you're defective. Well, too bad. One of my children is partially deaf. He's defective. Another one of my children has problems with laterality. And my dad, her mother does too. You're defective. They're not defective. They learn a little differently. But they're not defective. At least, from my point of view, they're not defective. I just adjust what I'm doing. Dropping out. I use the term dropping out. We've got kids now staying in school till they're 18. Right? The law says you have to stay in school till you're 18. So the kids drop out mentally at 15, but they're physically or locationally present until they're 18 because they have to be. And it may not be a big issue here, but when you're in rural Ontario, I guarantee you, if kids are truant, they get hauled into court. And I can remember a judge saying to a child, I'm sentencing you to attend school. And the child laughed in the judge's face. And the judge said, understand what I'm saying. Truancy is a misdemeanor. Contempt of court is serious. If you don't go to school, you're in contempt and you're in detention. So, okay, so we force them to go, but they're not really there. They're just locationally present. If we've lost them, if they're not engaged, we're in difficulty. We've got kids that are getting no post-secondary education. It wasn't an issue when I was a boy. Completing high school was an accomplishment when I was a boy. It is now, though. No post-secondary education, you're in big trouble. Well, how about I tell you this? There's been a 70% increase in the number of boys leaving secondary school in the last 10 years. A 70% increase in the number of boys who say, I'll never set foot in a classroom again. And that includes, as telling my own stories here. It includes my son-in-law. My son-in-law had an opportunity to, he's a mechanic, had an opportunity to go and do additional training. He couldn't face going back to school. He started, and even in spite of any of my efforts or anybody to try and jolly him along, he just couldn't do it. He could. His school experience was so negative as far as he was concerned that he couldn't face going back to. Even though his employer was paying for it, he was going to get a promotion, higher wages, everything. Turned it down. So we look at substance abuse, big connection. The Prince's Trust in the United Kingdom, Prince Charles, Prince's Trust financed a major study, and there's a big correlation between substance abuse and the kids having difficulty and bad experiences in school. Crime, mental health issues, long-term unemployment, and suicide. There's a big connection with suicide. Well, we've just come off Mental Health Week, and for the first time in history, in the history of this country, it was men's and boys' mental health. That was the focus. This past week, you might not have known that, but that was supposed to be the focus. Well, men and boys are 4 times as likely to commit suicide as girls are. And it peaks at age 20 and age 50. So our sons are killing themselves, and our dads are killing themselves. And if someone's going to sit in this room and say it doesn't matter, well, folks, it does matter. It's my grandsons now. My sons are, well, actually, my sons are getting to the 50 age. So we're in a situation where this conceivably is my son. And if someone says, I'm not directly involved, oh, yes, I am. My own children are at risk. So I raise this, not as a horror story. Well, maybe this is a horror story, but just to give you an indication, this is serious. This is not to be trivialized. This is really, really serious. Well, 40% of university students are male, and that percentage is declining. And males are in the minority in almost all the professional schools. And that percentage is declining. And if you're interested, you may have heard about the 1% and the 99%. The biggest group in the 1% in Canada are people in the medical profession. And by the time you're my age, you'll be hardly any men in it. That may not matter. I don't think so. I think it does matter. The university graduates earn 70% more than high school graduates, and university graduates are much less likely to be unemployed. So I've got this one here. This is the most recent stats from the U.S. That's within the last couple of months. If you're a high school dropout, in the U.S. right now, 10%, close to 10% unemployment. University degree, here's the difference. But look at the difference even between college and university. So we had a government study, and before, I guess, the second last election we had in Ontario, there was a big push by one of the political parties, and I won't tar anybody, but yes, we need to encourage boys to go to college. Yeah, so they can have double the unemployment rate that girls will have because we encourage them to go to university. You don't think that's an issue? That's our whole society speaking. That's the message our whole society is giving. I mean, I freak every time I see these things, but the point is, look at the numbers. So what are some of the causes? Well, I would argue we've got a war on boys at the moment, and boyhood is increasingly viewed as a disorder. Being a boy, this is not a good time to grow up as a boy. Absolutely not a good time to grow up as a boy. Absolutely not. The disorder. Education, when I say feminization, I'm talking about the fact that in 1965, I know this well, in 1965, the students in Teachers College, the male students in elementary school teachers college was over 30%. It's now down to 5. It's now down to 5. And 50%, and back then, 5 out of 6 men stayed. Now, 1 out of 2 drops out within the first 5 years. So, Teresa, how many men teachers do you have on staff?
0.
Okay.
But we used to have 2 in Mr. Brown's. So we used to have 3.
There are school boards in this province, because I've talked to a number of directors, who have more schools than you can count on both hands that don't have a single male. Little boy arrives at school, and I'm not making this up, you think about it. Little boy arrives at school, it's a totally female environment. So what message does that have for a little boy? Schooling is something girls and women do. It's not something us guys do. It's just not something us guys do. Now, years ago, if you survived elementary school, when you got to secondary school, it was mostly men. Hence, we go back to the 1980s, and I was hiring teachers. And we specifically, if we got applications, we put out ads, we got applications, we put all the male applicants for secondary school teaching positions aside, and we only looked at the female candidates. We needed female principals. We took all the male applicants and put them aside, and we only looked at the women. That's all we looked at. And I was on the Government of Ontario's examining board for supervisory officer qualifications. Candidate, I was doing the orals. Candidate came in, there was a team of us. We were told specifically by the minister, if the candidate is a woman, she passes automatically. If the candidate is a male, he only passes if there are extenuating circumstances. I have that in my book. I can name names, I can name places we weren't supposed to, but at this point, most of the people are dead anyway. So, and why do we do that? Not for the candidates. We did all of those things because we needed, I didn't disagree incidentally with any of them. I was happy to do it. Because we needed the little girls to see women in those jobs so that they could do gender identity. This is something not only boys do, this is something girls do too. Well, the joke is, here I'm in Western Canada talking, well, in Ontario talking about this, and there are people in the room who actually benefited from that, who denied it. And I'm sitting there saying, okay, you're one of the people we hired. But we didn't tell anybody. We didn't tell anybody because we didn't say, see, I work in Catholic education, so I don't have a problem with this. We advertise for teachers. Qualification number 1. Qualification number 1. Catholic. So I became director of a Catholic school board. I didn't have to compete with everybody. I just had to compete with the Catholics. So it makes sense to me. We need role models for children. Then we hire the people we need for role models. But right now we need male role models for children, and not only role models but gender identity for children. And if I raise the issue, no one will talk to me. Oh no, we couldn't do anything like that. Well, why not? We did it 30 years ago. Why can't we do it now? We need to do it. Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
It might be a touch-off topic, but I remember those debates about the professions 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And in my radical, long hair, hippie university punk rock days in the 80s, I would say that
I was already old by then.
the 30 years from now, it's going to be so skewed the other way because of the getting women into the legal field, medicine, and all those.
Yeah.
So all these entrance requirements being compromised.
Yeah.
30 years from now, this is going to be completely different. And in fact,
It's already
verifying that it's already happened.
Yeah.
And I think and there's 3 of us guys sitting in the room, and I have 3 sons. I had no issue with it back then either.
No.
Because it was skewed, and we could kind of see that.
Yeah.
But I also wanted the women to go work in the coal mines of West Virginia, as well as become a lawyer. As well as become an educator, as well. But we don't do that. Or go work in the oil rigs up north in Alberta, where I'm from. But we didn't do that. We said, no, white-collar, professional, high-paying jobs is where we'll send all the women, including education.
Yeah.
We didn't send them to the coal mines of West Virginia.
No, I'm okay with all of this. But my whole point is that once you start tampering with affirmative action, and I don't even think of affirmative action for the people themselves. I'm only dealing with this in terms of what it's doing to creating gender models for children. So if I worked in a school or if I worked as a superintendent in a school board and I couldn't get women to apply for principalships because it's not something women did, I had a problem with that because that's a bad message.
Agreed.
Okay, but now we've reversed the situation. And I'm saying, okay, now we have to start saying, come on, we've got to even this up a bit. Not for the people themselves, but for the children. And as I say, when a boy arrives at school, I talk to parents who say, my son is 4 years old, and he's already coming home and saying, I don't want to go to school because it's only girls. It's only for girls. 4 years old, and they're saying that. And they're saying to me, what am I supposed to do? And I'm saying, well, tough question, because the reality is, when you arrive in a situation, if it's a girls' field hockey team, and I show up, I don't think I'm going to play for it. Even if they say I can play, I'm probably going to say, I don't think so. I mean, it's the old boy code, right? I might add, it's particularly hard on boys. My sister who's older than I am, my sister would proudly tell you that when she was growing up, she was a tomboy. Proudly tell you that. I would not proudly tell you I was a sissy. Sorry. She could get away with that. I couldn't. So that's the dilemma we have. Anyway, I'm not, this isn't like I'm anti-feminist or something. That's got nothing to do with feminism, so don't misunderstand. I'm just talking about the fact that as you walk into a situation and the only people you see are all men or all women, the children identify that as that's something men do or something women do. Not because they've been told that. It's because that's their experience. And so there's a story, and it's in my book. There's a story about a woman, a doctor working out of North York Hospital, actually, and she takes her son, and he's going to his pediatrician. And as he's walking through the building, he sees a male doctor, and he says to his mother, "Can men be doctors?" He'd never seen one. He'd never seen one. Therefore, his presumption was, it's just something girls do. Nobody told him that. It isn't like someone said, "Okay, boy, you don't do those things." Nobody had to tell him. That was his experience. And I talked about my 50 years of educational improvement. Oh boy, 50 years I've been involved in educational improvement. People in education might tell me how much better it is. Well, I was there 50 years ago and I'm still here now. And frankly, I just see a different group of kids who are getting hammered. Girls are doing much better after that 50 years, I might add, and boys are doing much worse. I don't think that's what we intended. Now, I want to talk about month of birth just for a minute, because you as parents, if you have a child that was born in November or December, anybody here with a child born in November or December? Okay. Bad timing. bad timing. Should have talked to me before you. 9 months before you should have talked to me. See, what the research is showing is that children born in November and December are 4 times as likely to be diagnosed with learning disabilities as children born in January and February. And if you take December and January, it's 6 times. Now, it's got nothing to do with the phases of the moon. It's got nothing to do with the calendar, because if you go to the UK, where the school year, where the age for entry is determined by September 1st, or August 31st, you have the same problem, except it appears in those 2 months instead of December and January.
So it's not the kids, it's the expectation we put on them at the wrong age.
You got it. You had 2 children, one born in January and one born in December. I don't have 2 children born in the same calendar year, but I have 2 girls that are born just over a year apart. I didn't expect them to talk the same day. I didn't expect them to walk the same day, or crawl, or be toilet trained, but the school system expected them to be able to read the same day. And my 2 principals at the back there can tell me that's not true, but this is EQAO week. So here they are in grade 3, and they're all doing the same test on the same day. And some of those kids are a full year older than others. Now, if you think those kids, I mean, it's possible that one of the younger ones will do better than the older ones, so on. But the probability is that kids a year older are going to do better. So, Edmonton. I've got to get to Edmonton in a minute. So, in the school system where we did this research, we looked at the birth dates of hockey players in the NHL. And lo and behold, they're almost all born in the first 3 months of the year. So, we looked at the OHL, and they're all born in the first, just about all. There are exceptions. Wayne Gretzky's an exception. So we looked at the OHL, virtually all born in the first 3 months. We looked at the Belleville Pee Wee All-Stars, 12-year-olds, almost all born in the first 3 months. And in Edmonton, they did the entire city, all the kids 12 years old playing hockey, and they're almost all born in the first 3 months of the year. And that's because you play hockey based on the year of your birth. And some kids are a year older than others. Poor kids who are a year younger don't have a hope. So at 5 years of age, you're out there, and now the guy's there is 6. And that's an enormous gulf. Now, I can understand parents saying, he's a higher probability of being learning disabled, so I can understand all that. But my kid's not going to have a future in hockey? This is Canada. That's important. How can we let this continue?
At least the kid born in January who's not going to succeed in school can at least be a hockey player.
That's it.
That's the sweet spot.
One would hope. Actually, unfortunately, it's the same kids that don't do well in school because of their birth date are the same ones that don't do well in hockey. And so they come to school, they're not going to be academic because you're younger, they're not going to be sports stars either. Yes, I'm sorry.
Do you suggest that people wait then?
No. No. I suggest that when children come to school, the teacher recognize that I have a one-room schoolhouse, and you are too young to have taught in a one-room schoolhouse. I'm not. I've been in a one-room schoolhouse. 28 kids in 8 grades. You don't have a whole lot of choice. You've got to take them for where they are, because they're all of that. All 28 of them are all of that. When I did my teacher training, there were a lot of one-room schoolhouses. So that was part of our teacher training and part of our practice teaching. Now it's not. So now the presumption is if they're in grade 3, they're all at the same point. And they're not. They're all over the map. So what do I think we need to do? What we did in Hastings, Prince Edward, we took the kids and we said, we did a ton of training with the teachers. We took every child, looked at every single child. Every single child in the system got looked at. Going from kindergarten to grade 1 and so on. Grade 1 to grade 2. Twice a year they get looked at. We went from 11% non-organic learning disabilities. Non-organic means they didn't have autism or whatever. Sort of garden variety learning disability. To 0. We didn't have any kids in grade 3 that couldn't read. We didn't, in the system, other than the ones who had organic issues. We didn't have a single kid being referred for special ed. 2 years later, we worked on this for 5 years. 2 years later, all the key players, the director, the superintendent, had all moved on to other things. And 2 years after that, everything was back the way it was. Put your hand in the pail of water, and the level rises. You take your hand out of the pail of water, and there's no evidence you ever put your hand there. There's no evidence in Hastings, Prince Edward that ever happened. I have it written up. I have the graphs. I have all the stuff from. It's doable. So once the birth's an issue, and if you already have made that decision, which you probably have, teachers in the UK time the children's birth.
Time the birth?
So that the kid will be born the right month. Because you want your child born at the end of the cycle, so that your child will be older.
Yeah, we did that. Good planning, guys.
I did.
Good planning, yeah, that's good. Somebody did. Now I'm going to talk about family parenting practices, and because this is not let's hammer the school system, we're talking about why this has happened. Family parenting practice is very, very important. So now we're on to what can we do? Okay, what can we do? Well, we buy 10 times as many books for girls as we do for boys. And everybody in this room will deny it. I guarantee you, everybody will deny it. I don't believe any of you, sorry. We do. We buy 10 times as many books. Publishers publish 95% of the books publishers publish for little children are aimed at girls. Don't believe me? Phone the publishers, because that's what I did. Phone the publishers. And they told me that. They said, well, why would we publish books for boys when they're that much of the market? When if we publish them for girls, they're this much of the market. What are we, in business to lose money? So they don't publish books for little boys, they publish books for little girls. So I have looked in 3 countries, bookstores, department stores, and so on. Virtually impossible to find books for little boys. No problem finding for girls, but very difficult for boys. Now my horror story, I'm beating this to death, but anyway, my horror story, I'm in Bell's Outlet store in Florida, and I have 9 grandchildren. So I see basketballs and I think, well, my 3 grandsons will like basketball, so I get 3 basketballs. Now I know my granddaughters well enough to know that they wouldn't thank me for a basketball. So I'm looking around to find something. I know. They got a good selection of books. I'll get them books. I'm standing there in front of the books, and I said, Jim, give your head a shake. You wrote the book about this. I was falling into the same trap that all parents fall into. Get sports equipment for the boys, get books for the girls. 50 years ago, I was there 50 years ago. 50 years ago, boys when they arrived at school might have been slightly behind girls in early literacy. Now they're as much as 6 months behind. That's how much it's changed in that period. Now, if you're going to tell me that's because girls have changed, 3-year-old girls have changed and 3-year-old boys, no. But parents have changed in terms of how they approach their children. And there are a whole lot of societal factors to that which we can't change. But we read more to our daughters than we do our sons. I guarantee you, if you say that to parents, they'll deny it. But they actually videotape them, and they do it.
Since I saw it 2 years ago, my son is now out reading my daughter, by the way.
Okay.
I'm keeping track. More books read by him.
Yeah. Unusual, but good. But not good for the daughter, but good for the son. The reality of this is we read more to our daughters. So then when you confront the parents with it, the parent will say, well, I try to read to my son, but he doesn't want to sit on my lap and he wants to go and play and so on. And the answer, of course, is, yeah, he goes and plays with his truck, but he doesn't go deaf. So keep reading. We don't. Because we assume that because the child is not doing what an adult does, and that is sitting the way you patiently are sitting, if the child doesn't do that, that he's not listening anymore. That's not true. He's just moving his truck around because he's been sitting long enough. He wants to do something else. And that's biological. That part is biological. The hearing part, no, sorry, doesn't work that way. So there are a number of parenting things. So anyway, move on quickly here. So what can we do to help families help their sons? Well, my big message is focusing on prevention, and then we don't need to do the treatment afterwards. And it's always ironic for me when I talk to someone in education and try to explain the whole thing about prevention, and then the person comes back to me with, yeah, well, I know all about that because I do reading recovery. Sorry, folks, if you did this right in the first place, we wouldn't need reading recovery. But the prevention part is the homes. It's not the school. The school can help. It can send materials out and so on. But the fact of the matter is the prevention part. So change the things you can change. You're not going to change the school system. I mean, that's the reality. I'm sorry, that's the reality. Hey, 50 years I've been doing education improvement. I was with the Education Improvement Commission. I worked with OISE. I was a faculty member at Faculty of Ed at York University. We can go down the list of all of, I worked with the ministry. All of these around improving education, and not significantly different, sorry. But we could provide families with information materials, and that's what we're trying to do here, is at least give the information, and I'm hoping schools will give out materials. But anyway, the research suggests the number one predictor is levels of literacy skills. I'm going to read you something here. I should have read it to you earlier. This won't take that. This is just so you don't think I'm totally out of date, because I've been accused of that.
Can I play with the truck while you're doing it?
You can, yes. I went to talk to one school principal who told me to my face, education has changed in Jordan. Is my day ended yet, Teresa?
No.
Oh, good. You didn't fire me, I'm glad. Yes.
No.
Okay, so the point is, without ever talking to me, right away, because I'm old, it's all changed. Well, no it hasn't. Sorry. And Teresa, you know that when I'm in your school, I have my principal's hat on. I actually have my superintendent hat on. So I lawyer with intent. I know more that's going on in that Beaverton school than you do. Largely because I'm there more than you are, but sorry, I mean, I don't tell everybody what I see, but I do see. As school begins in the coming weeks, parents of boys should ask themselves a question. Is my son really welcome? A flurry of incidents last spring suggests that the answer is no. In May, Christopher Marshall, age 7, was suspended from his Virginia school for picking up a pencil and using it to shoot a bad guy. Suspended. For what? I would have thought relatively normal behavior. His friend was also suspended for getting shot. And he didn't even hold the pencil, but he probably did a theatrical dying, but anyway. If you think I'm making this up, this is real. Jack Welch, also 7, was sent home from his Maryland school for eating the corners off a strawberry Pop-Tart into the shape of a gun.
Sorry.
That takes some imagination.
Yeah, he didn't shoot anybody with it, with his Pop-Tart, but it was the shape of a gun. Out. Colorado's Alex Evans, age 7, was suspended for throwing an imaginary hand grenade at bad guys in order to save the world. Out. In all these cases, school officials found the children to be in violation of the school's zero tolerance policies for firearms. My son and I were out on a trip. We've just come back, and one of my sons, my second oldest son, and we went into a Waffle House, and there was a sign. This is down in the U.S. It's like no firearms allowed on the premises. we debated whether we needed to go in or not, but given the fact neither of us was armed. Okay, so zero tolerance policies for firearms, which is clearly a ludicrous application of the rule. But common sense isn't the only thing at stake here. In the name of zero tolerance, our schools are becoming hostile environments for young boys. So, anyway, that's just to give you that one. You'll like this one. Do teachers really discriminate against boys? Okay. This study was done out of Columbia University. Columbia University is the big education college in the U.S. Columbia is the biggie. They did a study, and in the study they looked at kindergarten children, and they did thousands of cases. This isn't like they looked at 6 or something. They looked at thousands. And what did they discover? They discovered that they tested the children for literacy, math, and science. And the girls performed better than the boys, slightly better than the boys in literacy, slightly worse than the boys in math, and significantly lower than the boys in science. They didn't tell anybody the results. And then they asked the teachers, evaluate these kids, tell us. And the teachers, without exception, rated the girls way higher in literacy and higher in math and science. But any boy that exhibited, I can't find this in quotes, feminine characteristics got graded the same as the girls did. So it had nothing to do with their knowledge of math, science, or whatever. It had to do with the fact they didn't behave the way I expected to behave. Now I have 2 daughters and I have 3 sons. Do you know what? I know what it's like to be a boy. I haven't the foggiest idea what it's like to grow up as a girl. I've got 6 granddaughters. I understand intellectually what it's like to be a girl. That's where it is. My daughter, her mother and I are sitting there, and another one of my daughters and one of my sons. And my one daughter, who has 3, at the time, had 3 teenage granddaughters, or 3 teenage daughters, my granddaughter, said, it's a way harder to grow up as a girl than a boy. We all looked at one another. She's going on her experience. Meanwhile, her brother's sitting there saying, I don't know what's like. But I don't know. I haven't been there. And so that's one of the dilemmas. One of the dilemmas is, I know what it's like to be a little boy, but I don't know what it's like to be a little girl, which takes me back to my argument about we need more men. But anyway, that's the big predictor. And it's an amazing predictor. I got a phone call from the Ministry of Education in Saskatchewan asking me for my opinion on what they could do with grade 3 students in literacy. I said, it's too late. I said, why on earth did you pick grade 3? Well, because if kids can't read well by grade 3, they're going to be gone. Well, it's too late to start when they're in grade 3. Well, we'll remediate it. I said, too late. Too late. Too late. I said, why did you pick grade 3? Well, for that one obvious reason. The second reason is mea culpa. They got the directors in and asked the directors, and the directors all say grade 3. Talk about asking the wrong people. Anyway, I was the director. But anyway, talk about asking the wrong people. It's too late. However, that doesn't mean we can't remediate it. Okay, I've talked about the 6 months behind, and the school system hasn't been very successful at closing that gap. And boys struggle in school, and they develop learning disabilities that are psychological rather than any other way. And the only known cure would be years of psychotherapy, which we aren't going to do. And the boys become disengaged. And so what if families could help improve the literacy level? And what if we reduce the number of ADHD cases? You'd be interested to know that if your child's birthday falls at the end of the year, there's much higher probability that a child will be diagnosed with ADHD. That's because we don't really have any tests for ADHD. It's strictly a case of the child's exhibiting some kind of behavior. Okay. In the U.S. right now, 1/5 of the boys in U.S. secondary school have been diagnosed with ADHD. Now, if 1/5 of the kids, the boys or girls, whatever, in U.S. schools have been diagnosed with high blood pressure or something, we do something. For one thing, we want to know if we had the right measurements, but we'll do something. 1/5, I mean, give me a break. 1/5, 1 in 5 kids. Look around yourself. Well, but there aren't even 5 guys here, so fortunately, it's the 5th guy who's not here. He's one of the ADHD.
I can tell you all 3 of us do.
No,
we know each other.
You got to start with me. I'm the number one.
The other 2 guys got distracted on the way here.
Exactly. They didn't even make it. Yeah. So when we do it, well, we can do these things, and I'll take you through this because we did do it in the school board I was in. So here's some tips for parents to consider. And this is for your young children. Learning's holistic, and we now know that children learn literacy in a holistic manner. So when you speak to the child, the child's watching your face, watching your lips, and so on. We didn't know that necessarily, but we know it now. And we tend to do it more with girls and boys. Here we go again. Speak with, not just to your children, because that helps them develop literacy. And by the time a child arrives at school, some kids have heard 6 million more words than some other kids have heard. 6 million! Needless to say, some kids are miles advanced in terms of literacy because of that, because of hearing and speaking. And it's different if you simply tell a kid something, but if you engage in a conversation, it makes a difference. Read to and listen to them read and engage in physical contact. And the interesting thing is, getting back to what I had mentioned earlier about stuff that we're doing in New Brunswick, the message is that a child is read to, and the child begins to identify books and reading with love, affection, all of those things. So you read to your child, you sit the child on your knee or sit the child beside you, and all of those things, you will see a child who's had that experience go to the chair that you'd sat in, pick up a book that the child can't read, and the child gets all that warm, fuzzy feeling that child got from you. If you want to know the research behind that, that's Pavlov, of course. The child identifies that and feels that. The child arrives at school, the child gravitates to here because every one of these books is love and affection. Okay, give the child a book that the child can own. This is my book. I can't read this book, but it's mine. I take it to bed with me. This is my book. It's like a teddy bear. And when I see Uncle Mark, I say, Uncle Mark, would you read my book for me, please? And Uncle Mark reads me the book, and I get the book back, and I feel really good about it. We do that with girls, and we don't do it with boys. So I'm saying to parents, you have to think about whether you're doing that with boys. Now, I'm going to lay one on the guys here. The fact of the matter is that the only person reading to the child is his mother. He identifies it's something that women do. It has to be something us guys do. It has to be something us guys do. Because the little boy has to say, hey, us guys do this. Because if they don't, now you've got a child who's in grade 6, you don't want any part of it. Because like, us guys don't do that. So, in one of the presentations I did that I had 2 people at, one of the ladies, one of the people there was a woman who said, my child is in grade 6 and he won't do his homework. And the reason he won't do his homework is because the other guys will dump all over him. So I'm trying to come up with strategies on how he can do his homework without centering himself out. Because he's not going to center himself. He's not going to lose his street cred by doing that homework and handing it in. So if we don't, we have to come up with strategies on how the child it can get around that. But we have to look at the whole issue. Because that, fine, we can find some way to solve for this one child, but we need to look at the broader picture. And if that's the message we're giving kids, we've got trouble. Anyway, physical contact is really, really, really an important thing, because then kids really identify with that. They need to see you engaged in reading. So if they never see their dad reading, or the male figure in the family, and it's got to be more than just bedtime stories. And it doesn't matter. It can be a newspaper. It can be, Hot Rod Magazine. It doesn't really matter. Give children their own books, even before they read. That was my bit with carrying the book around. And boys have been provided with books that have certain characteristics are more likely to have higher levels of literacy. They need books that have a male character. They'll identify. Someone I can identify with. So I'm not holding up a copy of My Little Princess. Lots of those in the stores. I'm holding up a book with a guy. And my cat. Books that the boys actually own. So, you write your name in the book. You personalize them. You write all over it. You draw pictures of it. Because it's yours. I didn't do that with my children. I had 5 children. The books were like in the library. Kids took what they needed and put it back when they finished it. If I had to do it over again, now that I know this, I'd have given them. I'd have bought 5 copies of Dr. Seuss, So, books that have action, adventure, problem solving. And so there's the central character in the reading book. Because we need to say, this is what us guys do. Us guys read books. And the vocabulary in the book, and I'm showing you these because these are the ones I work on. This is set up in such a way that you can tell me the story from the picture. So long before you can read, this is what's known in the business as full language. You can tell me the story based on this. You can predict. When you eventually can read some of the words, and the words in this are I use the Dolch list, which means they're the most commonly used words in English. So children are going to have these fairly early. So you read the child the story, and then the child can read part of it, but can make up the rest based on the fact that there are pictures here. Okay. I might add the adults in the book are shadow figures, because the book's about a little boy and his cat. And so that's the area that I've morphed. You see, I've gone from here to here to here. I'm sort of finding ways to make this more practical. So there's a trench. And what can families do if you've got kids who are already in school? See, I knew we'd get to this eventually. What can you do? Well, and this is critical. And it only takes a matter of minutes. This is what I call 3-minute drill. 3 minutes. The research on this is out of Simon Fraser University. So it's not like I'm making it up or something. This is out of it. And
It is BC though.
I know. Simon Fraser. But it's Canada's left coast, right? So you have daily conversations with your child about events at school. Now I'm not talking about 2 hours. I'm talking 3 or 4 minutes. And the research there suggests that children make gains of as much as 30% out of that. Okay, so I got a group of students when I was in the UK, 14, 15, 16 years old. School phobic. Could not read a word. They could not read the first 5 words on the Dolch list. Couldn't read a word. If they went to class, they would get themselves thrown out within the first 5 minutes. They would just simply misbehave. Go. And of course, they had such reputations that the minute they crossed the door frame going in, they were on their way out.
Can I add something?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I got this from you 2 years ago.
Yeah.
My son was, and my daughter does well in school.
Yeah.
My son was always doing okay in school.
Yeah.
But every single day I ask him, do you have any tests you brought
Yeah.
home? How are you doing? You know, I tell him how important it is.
Yeah.
And he comes home and he's proud every single day. Let me show me your, look at my test. And I got 93 today. And
Yeah.
so I really, the little bit I got from you
Yeah.
on this,
Yeah.
it's influenced him even more.
The reality is I work with these kids, and they'd come in the morning, and we'd set some goals for the day, and off they would go, and they would do their thing. And at the end of the day, they had to come back to my office. Actually, most of them spent most of the day in my office, but anyway, they came back to us. And before they left, they had to tell me something they learned that day that was of some value. Now, first time I asked the question, what was the answer? Nothing. Yeah, okay. That's fine. I'm standing in front of the door. You can't leave until you come up with something. Every day. We did it every single day. And then we moved to the next stage, which is what you do as a parent. You move to the next stage, and the next stage is you spend 3 minutes in the morning saying, what do you think you're going to do today? What do you think you're going to learn today? So now we're up to 6 minutes. And if you can't find 6 minutes for your child, you're in big trouble. Your child's in big trouble too. You need to set and have clear expectations. It's not, this is, and the message in this, incidentally, it's not only the fact that the child has to think about and review and so on. It's the fact that you care. If you care, gosh, Dad cares about this. Maybe I should care too. That's what it's about. And then you have to model the behavior. I mean, it's like it'd be somewhat similar to my father saying, "Don't take up smoking. You're in big trouble if I catch you smoking." Sorry. You have to model the behavior. It's not enough to just tell them. Now, share your personal knowledge. You've heard this. This part hasn't changed. Share your personal knowledge. See, one of the things I learned a long time ago was, as a teacher, I'm an expert on teaching. As a parent, you're the expert on your child. And if a teacher ever tries to say to me, I know your child better than you do, it'll be curtains. Trust me. I'm quite willing to have the teacher tell me the teacher knows more about teaching than I do. But the teacher better not tell me that he or she knows more about my child than I do. Or that my child is more important to the teacher than that kid is to me. The worst parent you ever met cares more about his or her child than anybody else does. The most ineffective, down-and-out parent. And if you don't believe that, you think about your own children, how much they mean to you. You wouldn't be here tonight, except that this matters to you. So you need to share that. So you need to go to the school before it opens in September and meet the teachers. And tell the teachers what they need to know about your child. So, concrete example. I had a son who was like this big when he started school. And he goes to kindergarten. No, he didn't go to kindergarten. They didn't have kindergarten back then. I think about it. He went to grade 1. And so I go see the teacher for parent interview. Not the beginning of the year, which I should have done. Didn't know it back then, but I know it now. Go see it. It's the end of first term. Teacher says, talks to me about how he's doing, and then says, and then I dress him to go out at recess. I'm like, you dress him? Oh yeah, he's too small. He's been dressing himself for 2 years. He was quite willing to stand there. I mean, hey, this is great. Mom, Dad don't do this. But. So you need to share that knowledge. And if you've got a child like one of mine that has hearing loss, if you have a child, you need to explain that. You need to explain those things. You need to tell the teacher that early on, because otherwise you get into the end of first term, and even then you may not tell the teacher. So it's important that you share that knowledge. You have to engage in a parent-teacher conference. I hate the word interview. Interview was what I went through when I was trying to get a job. Interviewee, or interviewer, interviewee. And then later I was the one doing interviewing. Interviewer, interviewee. No, it's a conference between two equals. And if you're not treated as an equal, get up and leave. Go to Teresa's office. Tell her what you think. Because the fact of the matter is you have to recognize, this is my level of expertise, that's yours. Let's work together. Sorry, you wanted to say? Okay.
No.
All right.
Thank you.
You got to meet as equals. You have to have high expectations. And that's one of the big factors. Okay, now, so where do you see this? Immigrant families arrive in Canada, and their kids do phenomenally well in school. A generation later, they're like all the rest of our kids. So what happened? Well, when that first generation arrived and they moved here because they wanted a better life for their children. By God, they had those expectations, you're going to do it. After a generation or two, they're like all the rest of them. So you have to have that. You have to convey that. So you have to make sure that they understand that. And I don't mean, beating them up with it, but the fact of the matter is, you don't discuss whether they're going to go to college or not. You discuss what courses they're going to take. There's no discussion that you're going. I mean, that isn't even. How did that ever come into the conversation? That's not part of the conversation. The conversation is, what are you going to do when you get here? What are you going to do at university when you get here?
Around our house, I call my son Dr. Kramer now.
Yeah. Okay. That's true. There you go. You have to raise this issue. You have to, as parents, you have to raise this issue. And if you raise the issue with your school principal, if you raise it with your trustee, if you contact the superintendent, if you make a total pass to yourself, raising this issue, you might get them to do something. Now, I was hiring teachers, and I was head of the personnel department in Metro Separate years ago. I went from there to Hastings, Prince Edward. I got the teachers I wanted. I hired them from all over Canada. I even hired one from Alaska. The fact of the matter is, you get them if you go and find them. School boards don't even run ads anymore. Yeah.
I wonder, is it too, I'm just thinking about that whole issue now, which is so true. I wonder, does it go back a bit further? Like, I'm wondering, is it kind of trying to encourage the young men in university to go into teaching? Because I don't think the faculties have a lot of young men in teaching at all.
5%.
Right, so it's almost like it has to start younger. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
Well, old Doc Bennett, before your time, who was the chief separate school board inspector in the days before we had our own superintendents, he would go into high schools and go into Catholic high schools and talk to the students about pursuing a career in education. We needed Catholic teachers. He would go in and pursue that. So here I go. Your superintendent should be in your secondary schools saying to kids, hey, particularly boys, this is something for you to look at.
It's a chicken and an egg, right? It's the story of the chicken and the egg.
Yeah,
it is.
but
Don't we have to agree that that's desirable first
Yeah.
before we go into the schools and start telling boys just because right now I'm sensing that it isn't. It just isn't. Right? I think it's the school system with the makeup, and you hear 0 male teachers in this school.
yeah,
That's kind of where everybody just wants it right now.
that's where a lot. And you have to realize that for every solution, there's a problem. I didn't get that backwards. For every solution, there's a problem. So I talked to Dufferin Peel, and I hope you don't know anybody there. Talked to Dufferin Peel, and the person who was in charge of hiring had all the problems. And it didn't matter what solution I suggested. He came up with a new problem. And I said, well, you know, I can solve your problem for you, but if you just want to continue doing what you're doing and not listen to anything anybody says, because we really should solve this problem. Right, now what else have I got to do? You know, it either matters or it doesn't. And yes, it matters. I mean, if you haven't believed it at this point, it matters. It matters. It mattered to girls in the 80s. It mattered to girls in the 80s, and we took action. It matters to boys. Now, we have to take action, and you'll get action if enough parents start to raise the issue and say, hey, wait a minute, we got a problem here. And my boys are suffering as a result of it. Now, before we go any further, does anybody have a real good horror story they want to tell us?
I'll say, I said very quickly earlier, but other people weren't here. I asked Gwen about high school, and she just started grade 9, and she says the boys, I was talking about her marks and how she could do a little better, and she said, well, the boys,
No, tell
these please weren't here.
Tell it.
And my daughter said, but Daddy, most of the boys in the school, if they get 50, 55, they're ecstatic. They think they're in heaven. I don't know if it's true. It's my daughter's perspective, but to me, that's a horror story for the boys in Uxbridge.
Or it's the social norm. It's what they aspire. Even if they're getting an 80, they don't want to say it.
No.
That's part of the problem too, right? Is they're perpetuating
They're
that.
getting a lower mark. They don't.
Yes.
And that's where the girls were in 1980. You had girls deliberately getting
Yeah, it wasn't
low
cool to be
grades.
smart.
Girls deliberately getting low. Incidentally, what I didn't mention, I told you about the kindergarten business, I didn't mention the fact that there's been a study done at Queen's University. That's not BC.
Does that pass your standard?
A study done out of Queen's, replicated in the US and replicated in the UK. They had teachers marking papers. If it had a girl's name on the paper, it got a higher grade than the exact same paper got if it had a boy's name on it. The very paper, they just changed the name on it. And it consistently, didn't matter whether a male or female marking incident either, just consistently got higher grade that had a girl's name on it. Well, then the US went a little further, good for them. If it had a common girl's name on it, it got a higher grade than if it had one that sounded like a Muslim or whatever. Same paper. Same paper. In the UK, they went one step further. They took it to university level. And if it had what sounded like a black student's name, or Pakistani or whatever, it got a lower grade. Same paper. And as I say, it was done originally. It was done under Queen's, and then it was done. They replicated it in the U.S. with taking it one step further and replicated it again in the U.K. within the last 2 years. So the reality is, our biases play a big factor. Don't misunderstand. Not one of those people did it maliciously. I don't think they did anyway. They just knew that girls do better work than boys. So my horror story is, I taught a boy, and politely, he was as thick as 2 planks. Okay? He was politely. He really was a slow learner. Really was. Nicest kid you ever found. Nicest kid. I managed to get him to the point where he could do word searches and find words on the word search. That's as far as I got. So anyway, he's doing his O-level, his GCSE exams, and I'm supposed to help any kids that need help getting their coursework done. So I asked his English teacher, how's he doing? Nice young man, teaching in English. He said, Paul's the kid's name. Paul, he's doing fine. Okay, Paul's doing fine. Now I believe in miracles. Paul's doing fine. Gifts of the Holy Spirit. come on in. So I will. Gets his mark book out. He opens his mark book. Paul doesn't have 20% of any test he ever wrote, and he has exactly 0 coursework turned. Poor teacher. Flushes her head. But Paul was a really nice guy. He was really a nice guy. The halo of it. He was a brilliant student. He wasn't. Okay, now I get personal. My granddaughter went all the way through elementary school and never learned to read. This is true. Absolutely true. Did not learn to read. And absolutely, doesn't run, not because it runs in the family. Absolutely beautiful young woman. Absolutely beautiful. A personality to die for.